This is the fourth part, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is the fourth part of our critical thinking series. Today I will conclude it. If there is any further addition or interest, we can always revisit it. I've given references at the bottom of this front slide from where this talk has been put together. Now, the quality of our thinking, quality of our life is determined by the quality of our thinking. And the first definition is, if you remember, I had given some definitions in first and second thought, I think, first and second presentation, but I'll go through these two definitions over here. First is critical thinking is self-guided, disciplined thought that attempts to reason at the highest level of quality in a fair-minded way. The second definition is purposeful, reflective judgment, which manifests itself in reasoned consideration of evidence, context, methods, standards, and conceptualizations in deciding what to believe or what to do. So both have some kind of a conclusion, but the second definition I prefer because over here it says reflective judgment, which manifests itself in reasoned consideration. So reasoning is absolutely important. That first we think and then we reason it. And what do we reason about? On evidence, context, methods, standards, and conceptualizations, and then decide what to believe or what to do. So both are important, that what we get into our consciousness and then what we are going to do with it. People who think critically consistently attempt to live rationally, reasonable, and with empathy. They are keenly aware of the inherently flawed nature of human thinking. Very important that they are aware of this fact that human thinking can be flawed or is flawed at a fundamental level. When left unchecked, they strive to diminish the power of their egocentric and sociocentric tendencies. And the last is they use the intellectual tools that critical thinking offers. Concepts and principles that enable them to analyze, assess, and improve thinking. So nutshell is that we have to concentrate on what we are thinking and how we are thinking and how we can change it. The presentation has following parts. What we have covered so far, remember we had three presentations before this. Then is the intellectual traits. In my third talk, I had covered these very briefly, but today I'll give them slightly more detailed treatment. Some general guidelines, the link between critical thinking and the Quran. The Socratic questioning. I included this because this is also mentioned a lot in the literature in relation to critical thinking. Then ethical reasoning, again, I thought this is a very good subject we should touch upon. It's a very big subject in its own right, but over here I've just touched upon. And then self-evaluation. So all of this, how can it help us for self-evaluation and why self-evaluation is important and is it possible? And finally, we will conclude our talk. First, what we have covered so far. If we remember in the first talk, we briefly touched on three levels of thinking, which is a lower order thinking, higher order thinking, and highest order thinking. So lower order is a very basic thinking where most human beings live their life. Second is higher order thinking, which is a rational level where people use their reason more frequently, but they don't use it as a habit. And in the highest order thinking is where it becomes a habit. Next is we looked at the human self and what are its constituents, including I, its consciousness, intellect, memory, emotions, and desires. We also touched upon various, self-concepts. And these concepts indicated that human self is more or less influenced by the environment, whether that is an external environment or an environment which we create our own self within ourselves. So our own inner environment could be different from the environment in which we live. And this is what critical thinking does, that it points to our inner environment that it can be changed. We also looked at some barriers to our thinking. Very important, we should recognize what is preventing some of the important influences. For example, if we are reading a book, whether that book is influencing our thought or not, and are we getting something positive out of it. We also had a look at the psychological resources which each one of us possesses at every point in time. These can be enhanced using the Quranic reality. Psychological resources, what it is that at any point in time, we have certain psychological resources. And if we are hit hard, for example, by a grief, can we cope with it? If we cannot cope with it, we will have depression or we will go into anxiety. So it is important that we understand those. Maybe we will touch it again at some point. We had a look at 6 critical thinking skills in some detail, and these are interpretation, analysis, inference, evaluation, explanation, and self-regulation. The important thing is whatever skills we use, these should form part of our self-regulation process. Because if we know the skills and we are not applying it, then they are of no use. Next were elements of thought. And under elements of thought, we said we require information, we have a purpose or goal, question at issue. If we are dealing with an issue, what is the question over there which needs to be answered? What are our assumptions? Very important, because assumptions derive whatever we do. Concepts, inferences are interpretations. So interpretations can become inferences, because whatever we are driving out of something, we can then interpret it. But then interpretations vary according to our own value system. Implications and consequences. Whatever we do in life has implications for us as well as for others, and has consequences. Could be short-term consequences, and long-term consequences are always there, because we know that according to the Quran, it affects ourselves. And then we have a point of view. Next was universal intellectual standards. Clarity, that whatever we are looking at must be very clear, and if it is not, we should make an effort to make it very clear. That there should be no ambiguity. Accuracy, it must be accurate, and it should be precise as well. Precision, accuracy and precision, we can differentiate between the two. Precision is really more maybe a mechanical thing or an investigation in which we have to look at. And if information is presented to us, we have to look at its accuracy. Relevance, the problem in hand, whether it is relevant to that or not. Depth and breadth both deal with the extent of that particular, whatever we are doing. For example, an investigation, research, and even looking at our consciousness, we should look at the depth of it and the breadth of it. Logic, significance. We shouldn't do things if these are not significant. So we should look at it because it is significant, it matters. And fairness, that is our own biases, prejudices must never influence our decision making. Because our own biases, if these are against those values, for example, if these are against the permanent values, then we are introducing contamination in it. These are to carry out assessment of our thinking. Our thinking is to be treated like a known valuable entity. Now, this is something very important, and I'll be happy to answer a question on that. The thinking should be taken as an entity, as something very valuable asset of ours. So we have to be aware of it all the time. And with practice, maybe we can. A checklist for reasoning. We have gone through these points. All reasoning has a purpose. All reasoning is to solve some problems. All reasoning is based on some assumptions. All reasoning is based on evidence. All reasoning is expressed through concepts and ideas. All reasoning contains inferences or interpretations. All reasoning has implications and consequences. And then we looked at intellectual traits. These are the traits we have to acquire ourselves, and with a view to display them within our self or within our personality. Intellectual humility, intellectual integrity, confidence in reason, intellectual perseverance, intellectual courage, intellectual empathy, intellectual autonomy, and fair-mindedness. Now, these are the 2 states of human mind, a basic schematic. I thought this is very good. And it represents 2 sides of a human mind. On the left side is largely undeveloped rational capacity. So we get these, let's say, by nature. And on the right are intrinsic irrational propensities. And we should be aware of both. On the rational side, if we develop it, we become fair-minded. and it becomes self-developing. We, in fact, start enjoying it. People who are rational or more rational, they start enjoying it. They want to use it. And it becomes a conscious processes. And it appears to the mind as rational, as normal. Now, this also forms part of our mind. And the other side is intrinsic irrational propensities. These are egocentric, and when they are combined with others, these become sociocentric. And what is the problem with egocentric is it is selfish and self-validating, that whatever we are doing, we are ourselves validating it. That since I am doing right, therefore I should do it. And that right is defined by our own desires. And it becomes unconscious processes. See, between the rational side and the other side, it is a conscious process. This is an unconscious process. And when it becomes a group thing, then it becomes groupish and group validating. And it is very much, we will see it in religious congregations and religious sects, and these people who they rhyme together, and they, in that belief system, this is very much applicable. It is also applicable to political parties in the world. It is applicable to a lot of groups, which we can see in our daily life. And second aspect is that egocentric thinking strives to get what it wants using two strategies. So the title is Distinguish Egocentric Dominion from Egocentric Submission. This is absolutely brilliant. What happens is that human beings who are egocentric, and this is our default position, we see plenty of these in the world, particularly at the top, and even the bosses within different organizations. They dominate and using direct power over others. But those who submit to them, they also dominate further on. And now what has happened is in the world, particularly at the top, which is called a deep state. The deep state is this submission. They are wielding that power in the name of this one on the top. So they impose him, they elect him, they bring him over here, and in his name, then continue what they are doing at a lower level. So this is a very, very interesting combination. And if we see this under egocentric thinking, we seek to satisfy our egocentric desires either directly or indirectly by exercising power and control over others, or by submitting to those who can act to serve our interest. And this is the crux of it. To put it crudely, egocentric behavior either bullies or grovels. Let's go to the next one, that is the intellectual traits, and look at them in a bit more detail. The first one is intellectual humility. It is the disposition to distinguish at any given moment and in any given situation between what we know and what we don't know. So things we know and the things we don't know. So we are trying to differentiate between the two. People disposed toward intellectual humility recognize the natural tendency of the mind to think it knows more than it does. So people think that I know more than what I really know. To see itself as right when the evidence proves otherwise. And it's very interesting that others know it, that I don't know as much as I'm trying to project, but they don't tell me. They consider other viewpoints to understand them in good faith, not to dismiss them, how to develop intellectual humility. So whole intellectual humility is to know what I know and to know what I don't know, and then admit it. There is no point in boasting about something which I don't know. Ask questions when there is no evidence for own beliefs. And this is a very much a religious thing, that I know it, that whatever I'm doing, it will take me to that paradise which I think is reserved for me. Next is notice when arguing for beliefs without evidence to justify them. And we see endless of it. And I've seen it, people who without understanding something, they try to convince others. Question beliefs which seem to be obviously true to us, for example, religious, cultural, or political, are about man-made systems. Next is look at alternative sources, information to consider other viewpoints. Very important. This is what critical thinking does, is that we have to see that others have a viewpoint as well. And let us have a tolerant view of it, listen to them, because they think about it. And we should give it some kind of a respect or a patient hearing. If we don't have time, that's a separate issue. Next is don't be afraid to explore new beliefs, hence be open to new insights. Test intellectual humility, that we should test it as well. For example, by using the permanent values of the Quran, for example, how many one can apply to any daily news item. First, we need to know these. And final is, bottom line is discover your own ignorance. So I should discover my own ignorance, that how much I know and how much I do not. Next is intellectual integrity. To be consistent in the intellectual standards one applies to practice what one advocates for others. This we see it quite often in our daily lives, particularly in our working life. To hold oneself to the same rigorous standards of evidence and proof to which one holds others, and to honestly admit discrepancies and inconsistencies in one's own thought and action. Strive to be a person of integrity, be aware of your own hypocrisy. Fair-mindedness, treat all viewpoints alike without reference to one's own feelings or vested interests or the feelings of vested interests of one's friends, community, or nations. Implies adherence to intellectual standards without reference to one's own advantage or the advantage of one's group. Do justice even if it is against your own self. And that is a command from the Quran. Intellectual courage. We need to be true to our thinking and value system in all circumstances. We need to have consciousness to face and fairly address ideas, viewpoints, opinions, which we find against the permanent values, keeping in mind the law of requital. We should always keep it in mind that we are accountable for that. There are implications and consequences of what we do. These opinions, ideas, viewpoints come in all forms, wrapped in attractive garbs. And we need to confront these within our mind first, and then have the courage to confront it. Next is intellectual empathy. This requires us to think within the viewpoints of others, especially those we think are wrong. It's important to look at the people whom we think are wrong. This is difficult until we recognize how often we have been wrong in the past and others have been right. Those who think differently from us sometimes possess truths we have not yet discovered. We need to practice it. Can we empathize with Allah through his book? Now, this is added by myself, that we expect Allah to empathize with us. That is why we pray to him. But have we tried to empathize with Allah, that why did he create us in the first place? Why did he create such a big universe for us? Why did he put us on this earth? What is lying beyond death? What exact system should we have in our world? And is it meant to be like this? Is it meant to be chaotic? So all these things are part of this intellectual empathy. So this is maybe a slightly different tangent to this. Strategies for empathizing with others. During a disagreement, switch role. Ask questions for clarification, not jump to a conclusion. Very important. We can save a lot of problems if we don't jump to conclusion. The moment somebody has opened his mouth and said a few words, we should never jump to conclusion. During a discussion, summarize what another person is saying. For example, what I understand you to be saying is this correct? If somebody has said something, if we haven't understood it, let us empathize with him and ask him what exactly he means. He or she means. I should be equal in gender. When reading, say to yourself what you think the author is saying. Explain it to someone else without any prejudice or bias. Recheck the text for accuracy. Only when you are sure, or I'm sure, to understand a viewpoint, are you in a position to disagree or agree with it. And the next one is intellectual autonomy. Having rational control of one's beliefs, values, and inferences, the ideal of CT, critical thinking, is to learn to think for oneself, to gain command over one's thought processes. It entails a commitment to analyzing and evaluating beliefs on the basis of reason and evidence, to question when it is rational to question, to believe when it is rational to believe, and to conform when it is rational to conform. Just see how the Quran makes all this easy and straightforward once we acquire the skill and understanding to do this in our life. Intellectual perseverance, acquiring a consciousness of the need to use intellectual insights and truths in spite of difficulties, obstacles, and frustrations. Life is full of frustrations. If we are following a certain path, there will always be some opposition. Firm adherence to permanent values despite the irrational opposition of others. In fact, this should be catered for and to be expected. Keeping in mind that if this pursuit of an aim is stopped, then consequences will not be good. Keeping consequences in mind all the time. Confidence in reason, being confident in the fact that one's higher interest and those of mankind will be best served by giving the freest play to reason as developed in the light of the Quran, by encouraging people to come to their own conclusion by developing their own rational faculties. The hallmark of the critical thinker is the disposition to change her or his mind when given a good reason to change. That is, when evidence is presented, we should be willing to change our opinion. So that means we should inculcate within ourselves. We should be aware of it. If different evidence is presented, then go with it. There's no point in holding on to wrong impressions and wrong evidences in our mind, because those contaminate our consciousness. Good thinkers want to change their thinking when they discover better thinking. Very important. Replace bad deeds with good deeds. In other words, they can and want to be moved by reason. Now, stages for reducing hypocrisy in ourselves. This was very interesting in the book, and I thought this needs to be shared. Begin to notice situations in which we expect more from others than we do from our own self. Target the areas of our greatest hypocrisy, usually based on our emotions. Some questions of interest: do I expect more from my spouse than I do myself? It's a home situation in which we see it, that I've got 2 arms and the 2 legs and wife has got the same. So we should have a shared amount of work within the house. From my co-workers, from other members, from children, from relations. Have I done enough of what I expect others to do? First thing we should see is that if we expect others to do that, we should find out, can I do it myself as well? Can I do a bit more? What all I can do but do not do. I'll repeat it again. What all I can do but do not do. Why not? And this thing came very evident to me when I'm trying to put this syllabus together for that education, that had I not think about it and died, I would have never explored this side of my life. So we need to explore ourselves, be creative. As Dr. Hamid Mia had said in his talk, be creative rather than just the other side round, that is Talit. Write a list of beliefs that seem most important to us. Then identify situations in which our behavior is inconsistent with those beliefs, where I say one thing and do another. Realize that what I believe is embedded in my actions, not in my words. So words, once these are converted into actions, we should watch out for that. What does my behavior tell me about myself? The Quran has put repeated emphasis on the accountability of our own self. Think about the way we are living our life. Are we living a life of integrity where our motives are transparent? Or are we hiding something significant? If so, what is it? Why am I doing this? How can I face it, i.e. my own hypocrisy? We know the Quran helps us to deal with it effectively once for all. Now, this is another interesting schematic. Distinguish between inferences and assumptions. Here is information. If this information is normal, then inference can be very simple. If somebody doesn't have an assumption, he will just say that this is the information, I can see it, there's a car over there, and I see a car. But if we have an assumption in between over here of our own, for example, if I'm prejudiced and I see the car of my neighbor, what will I do? I will say, he's a thief. Or I can put any other bad connotation to that. I can put a good connotation as well. So what I mean is, whatever assumptions we have, we color it. That's why I put it red. So we should look at our own assumptions. We should look at the information and then very, very carefully see whether this inference meets the standards of intellectual standards. Remember, I said accuracy and precision and all the clarity and all those points. So this is important. And I've quoted some paragraph from the book. It is important to clearly distinguish between these two elements or parts of reasoning. And inference is a step of mind in which mind says this is true, therefore that is true. Very, very deceptive. The conclusion or inference that something is true is based on something else being true or appearing true. We routinely make inferences every day in our life. All inferences are based on assumptions. So we must watch out for our assumptions. Remember, this is part of our elements of thought. I.e., beliefs we take for granted, these usually operate at the unconscious level. Uncover these assumptions, we may find these to be based on prejudice, stereotyping, bias, and other forms of irrational thinking. So we have to be aware of our assumptions as well as the emotions on which those assumptions are based. So that is important. Now, the next is some general guidelines. Ask deep questions. Ask those questions with discipline or thinking. Beware of our own hypocrisy. Deliberately target our purposes in life. See what are our purposes and we should analyze them. That what are we trying to achieve in life? Ultimately, what should look at is that when we are very closer to leaving this life, we shouldn't have any regrets and disappointments. That is the bottom line I use. That whatever I'm doing or we are doing in this life, we should target it very carefully because these have an impact on later part of our life. Don't be a conformist, thinking for yourself. Clarify your thinking. Our own thinking usually seems clear to us, even if it is not. Vague, ambiguous, muddled, deceptive, or misleading thinking are significant problems in human life. Be relevant, stick to the point. When thinking is relevant, it is focused on the main task at hand. Thinking through implications. We cannot be critical thinkers if we ignore the consequences of our life that follow from the thinking that is driving our thinking. Not to be fooled by the words people use. Look underneath words to unspoken realities. I'll repeat it. Look underneath words to unspoken realities. Take control of our emotions and desires. This is what the Quran teaches us. Not to be brainwashed. The Quran helps us with this. If we have a Quranic lens in front of us, I doubt it we can be brainwashed. And finally, figure out where to go from here. Now, this is about the 3 types of questions. Distinguish among questions of fact, preference, and judgment. It's very interesting. There are questions which are of one system questions, and they require evidence and reasoning within a system. They are correct answer. There is a correct answer to a question, simple, straightforward question, and it becomes knowledge. Second is that there is a no system in that, calls for stating a subjective preference. There is some kind of a statement made, and there is a subjective opinion which will come to you as an answer, and it cannot be assessed. Next is conflicting system, requires evidence and reasoning within multiple systems, better and worse answers, and it's very judgmental. Now I'll give you examples. First is it a question with one definite answer? That will go under one system. Is it a question that calls for a subjective choice? That will be a no system. Third is, does the question require us to consider competing answers? And now we will see the examples. The example for the first one is questions of a procedure, which is called one system. What is the size of this room? Very precise, 6 by 8 feet. What is the sum of 250 plus 370? Straightforward answer, unless somebody doesn't know how to sum it. How much did your car cost? Simple, straightforward. Questions of preference, no system. What color scheme do you prefer in your home? Number of colors, any answer, any subjective answer can come before us. What is your favorite place for holidays? Again, very subjective. Would you like to attend this meeting? Very subjective, binary answer, yes or no. Questions of judgment, conflicting systems. What is the best economic system? Very wide, we'll need probably a big paper to write it and try to justify it. What is the purpose of human creation? There are 7 billion people in the world. Everyone will have a different purpose of creation in his mind. How can we best address the most basic and significant problems of the world today? Very generic, very open, there is no particular answer for that, unless we are looking through the lens of the Quran. Now, this is, if you remember, I said that what is the link between critical thinking and the Quran? And we had looked at this picture, at this schematic. Unreflective thinker is here, then it goes through different stages and finally becomes a master thinker, and it becomes a second habit. And to superimpose on that is I've given some comments. Whatever way we decide to live our life, we need thinking, and the quality of our thinking will affect our daily individual and collective life. The Quran is an external guidance, and being complete provides us complete procedure and process of getting best from it, i.e. a self which can establish the system of deen. So if becomes a second habit and then becomes the Quranic thought process, then it should be able to establish the system of deen. CT, that is critical thinking, if acquired, may help in speeding up this process. Now we will look at the Socratic questioning, which is really very, very analytical type of questioning, very detailed. And here is the definition. Socratic questioning is a form of disciplined questioning that can be used to pursue thought in many directions and for many purposes, including to explore complex ideas, to get to the truth of things, to open up issues and problems, to uncover assumptions, to analyze concepts, to distinguish what we know from what we do not know, to follow our logical consequences of thought, or to control discussions. Now, in short, it is a discussion of what exactly it is slightly explained in 4 steps. It is led by a person who does nothing but ask questions. It's very interesting. One can use it in our teaching of any subject. That is systematic and disciplined, that it is not free for all. It is systematic and must be disciplined, wherein the leader directs the discussion by the question she asks, wherein everyone participating is helped to go beneath the surface of what is being discussed, to probe into the complexities of one or more fundamental ideas or questions. We ask these questions in our life, particularly in an academic environment, but we may not realize that it was a Socratic question. 3 general categories of Socratic questioning are spontaneous, where a situation arises and we ask a question. Exploratory, where we are already thought about it, there is some kind of a task in hand and we ask exploratory questions. And focused, to get something particular out of a situation. Next is application. For example, in cognitive behavior therapy, there are 2 possible ways it is done. First is the primary purpose of Socratic questioning to change minds or to guide discovery? So it can be used in both, that is to change minds as well as to guide discovery. And the person who wrote this paper, he said that it is better to not attempt to change the mind, but to guide discovery. So I thought this is very good. In our Quranic teaching, we should not force people or think that we can persuade others to change their mind. We should guide them to discovery. Let them probe their own life. Let them find out what do they want from their life. And this is the approach used in person-centered therapy or person-centered counseling as well, which was devised by Carl Rogers. Now, next is ethical reasoning. And language as a guide to ethical reasoning. This is interesting. Ideas are to humans like the air we breathe. We project them everywhere, yet we rarely notice this. We use words and the ideas they express to create a picture of the world. What we experience through ideas, often uncritically funneled into the categories of good and evil. Now, good and evil, we will deal in some future presentation. It's a fascinating subject in its own right. We uncritically assume ourselves to be good. We uncritically assume our enemies to be evil. We have seen it in the world that one country blames for all its faults on others and vice versa. We select positive terms to cover up the indefensible things we do. We select negative terms to condemn even the good things our enemies do. And we see it in our relatives, for example. If we see something bad, we condemn them completely. We make blanket statements. Oh, he's always like that. The whole world is miserable. So these kind of global statements are uncritical statements. So we should avoid that. We often see the word in a distorted way to our disadvantage. In the word, whatever good is coming to me, for example, is my own ability, but whatever bad is coming to me, it is word's fault, which is true as well. But what I mean is, if we look at it globally or universally, we should be a bit more pragmatic and a bit more objective. Ideas then are our paths to both reality and self-delusion. In our everyday life, we don't experience ourselves shaping what we see and constructing the world to our advantage. And this is where Quran helps us. Now, next point says the logic of ethical reasoning, purpose. To act as to help rather than harm other persons or sentient creatures. Sentient means thinking creatures. Next is question, how should we act so as to help rather than harm others? Information about our options for action with special emphasis on the information that helps us avoid harming others. Inference, judgments about what helps or harms others. So it's important that what kind of judgments we are making, and we should be aware of those judgments. If we are not aware of those judgments become part of our consciousness, and then our consciousness has those inferences which lurk around and contaminate everything which we experience in life. Essential concepts, the concept of contributing to rather than undermining the well-being of others. Very important. Assumptions, I've touched it previously as well. Humans are capable of distinguishing ethics from other modes of thinking, grasping fundamental ethical principles and acting consistently with them. So we should watch out for assumptions. Never make blanket assumptions. Human beings about as human beings. Human beings have a choice and intent. They change. The person whom we might be condemning today might be our best friend tomorrow. Implications. If we behave ethically, innocent persons and creatures are helped rather than harmed by what we do. Important point. If we are not harming anyone and the people around us are happy, and we also understand what is the reason, and of course, ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa nahwan anil munkar we are doing, then we are acting ethically. Point of view, seeing the world as a place where individuals and groups often act so as to harm innocent persons and creatures, seeing humans as obligated to help rather than harm others. And then we look at some of the human rights now, concluding ethical reasoning, a glance on human rights. This is very interesting. All humans are born equal, are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Now, these are the human rights according to the UN Charter. And then look around the world. What a Hippocratic word we have. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. Obviously, those in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, Africa, they don't have this. And Pakistan, India, everywhere. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. And while this is happening, people are being locked down, and over and above the slavery they are suffering from. No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. And this includes psychological torture as well. And I'll leave the judgment to yourself. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family. Obviously, those who framed these rights, they were only thinking of their own rights and their own family's rights. Everyone has the right to education. Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Those who have read Animal Farm or seen that picture, they know what this means. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration. Now, this is the emphatic statement. Without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, rational or social origin, property or status. All are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. So the question we have is, if the law is wrong, what do we do? There are 199 or 200 number of countries in the world. They all have different laws. Why do they have different laws? So that is the basic gross injustice. And then what happens, the way this law is obeyed, one law for one and another law is for somebody else. And now see the bottom line. Though the principles outlined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are universally accepted in theory, virtually every country violates them because they don't believe in the law of requital. They don't believe in accountability, and they are hypocrites. Self-evaluation. Is it possible? If yes, then why should we do it? Now, this is the just before the conclusion. This is a physical world, and we being physical, our body belongs to this world. Our self or nafs is not going to come back to this physical world. So our self or nafs is non-physical. This needs hard, intense thinking and reflection on our part, a constant reminding every day. So this is, I thought that it should hit hard on me as well and to everyone of us, that we are here for a finite time. We are not physical, we are non-physical, but physical being that this physical body is given to us to carry out the tasks of this life. So we should keep it in mind that we have finite time here. Second is, have we looked at our creation, its purpose intently and profoundly, the significance it demands from us, i.e. a bit more than which we use in the pursuit of successes of our physical world. So we should look at it not very subjectively, but objectively, that what we are trying to hold on will make our departure from this life very, very difficult. Are we fully conscious of the law of requital and its implications, the creation and development of ourselves, or are satisfied with whatever can be done is being accomplished? Has it been verified using the Quranic criteria? Not our own egocentric criterion, which follows our desires and provides self-satisfaction at every point in our life. So we should look at it very critically as discussed above. Self-evaluation using CT, clear thinking, is a way to know where we are and how much more we can do to make the human life better for everyone. And this includes our own too. Each thought counts, as it is thoughts which take us to deeds, and it is deeds which help create a self and create this world. The world around us needs people like us who can make a difference. The day we leave this world, we could tell our own self, I did my best with whatever means, energies, willpower, determination, motivation, resoluteness I had, alone as well as with others. So I leave now with no regrets and disappointments. Look forward to seeing my account in the hereafter. More on this in our Quranic presentations. Now we go to the conclusions from this critical thinking series. First is choice, intent, thinking makes us humans. The world around us is created through human thinking. If our thinking is good, the world around us will be a good place to live. Our default thinking status as humans is egocentric. We should always remind ourselves that our basic position was, it shouldn't be now, was egocentric because we have changed, which has limitations. We need to acquire critical thinking so that we can become better, and this changes not only our life, but also the life of others around us. So it's no point in changing our own life and say, oh, I'm all right, Jack, rest can go to hell. No, if rest go to hell, then I'll be living in hell because the hell will be created by all of them. Critical thinking is a process which includes a number of stages to reach to the higher stage. We can't reach that in one day. We have to gradually give ourselves time and move forward. During these stages, we need to learn critical thinking skills, elements of thought, universal intellectual standards, ethical reasoning, reasoning in general, acquire intellectual traits, and then be able to apply these in our own life to become critical thinkers. I've not included the Quran here. The existence of the law of requital means that whatever we do has consequences in the short as well as long term. Critical thinking helps to expand the horizon of our consciousness, and we can apply it in every sphere of our daily life, be it home, social gatherings, office environment, industry, politics, business, even in our self-evaluation. I'm not sure if we can apply it during our dreams. This can help change the outlook of our vision towards our own self as well as towards our fellow human beings. And finally, we are in this life for a finite time. We must keep reminding ourselves. And we need to come to grips with our inner potentials, known as well as not yet known. So we have tremendous potentials, and we should ask a question to ourselves: have I explored all my potentials before I leave this life? If we have means and knowledge but are not aware of these potentials, then critical thinking can help us to dig deep within us and bring these out to make our life a bit more meaningful for us as well as for others or those who are around us. And with that, I conclude this presentation, and thank you very much for patient listening. And now we will move on to any question or comment.